I fucking been through it, man. I'm here eating my fucking microwave dinner. I've done nothing but sleep for the last 2.5 days. All of you have made sure not to let me down on your responsibility to ream me in every group chat and every app mention that you could take the opportunity of over this weekend. I don't even want to make this episode, to be honest with you. That's it. I don't have anything else for a clever intro. Just play the fucking credits thing.
1, 2, 3, 4.
So, the putrid, vile, disgusting, horrible disaster of a week that was the NFL Week 1 finally came to an end in a spectacular way, may I mention. And I'll be talking about all of the good, the bad, the ugly a little later in the episode. But first, let's cover a few league reminders. So, the first league meetup for a game is going to be on Monday Night Football in Week 4. The Rams versus the Bengals, September 25th. We're going to have the event at the PT's that was directly adjacent to the Hooters where we all have met up multiple times. Now, the reason why we're switching over is because, number one, the Hooters is now closed. And number two, at PT's, there's a pool table and we can roll a few games while we're watching football. Now, I want to give a big thank you to everybody that contributed to our league fantasy trophy. I'll be handing out the stickers for everybody who donated at that league meetup. So if you show up to the event, not only will you get your name point for next year's drawing of the fantasy games, but if you donate it, we'll also be able to give you that sticker. Let's get into some NFL news and start off by covering the topic that everybody's going to be thinking about and talking about this week. It's sad, man. It's sad. You hate to see a veteran player, somebody that's been in the league for a long time, somebody that we've all watched since we were little kids and cheered on. A Hall of Famer. Basically the equivalent of like a Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Eli Manning. And it just sucks to see him going from a team that he was unhappy with, going through the whole change process, bringing along guys with him, Randall Cobb, Lazard, going through the whole season of Hard Knocks. They gained my sympathy. I liked Aaron Rodgers before, but honestly, just everything coming together to a T with this Achilles injury, you just can't feel anything but bad for the man. As far as the Jets are concerned, their defense looked unbelievable, keeping them in that game way longer than they should have. Although Zach Wilson still looked decent in the second half of the game, we'll have to see how their season progresses with him as a backup. All the NFL news and media is talking about replacing him. I don't know. We'll see what they do. Robert Saleh has came out and said that he supports Zach Wilson as their guy. So we'll see if that defense is able to grind out games for them with him at the helm. But definitely that has fantasy implications for the players that are rostered on the Jets. Like any of the wide receivers particularly. And honestly the running back room a little bit too. The NFL primetime games from this week ended up being 3 pretty big upsets. Starting off with the Lions coming out with a 1-point victory over the Chiefs on Thursday Night Football to kick off the NFL season. On Monday Night Football, the Jets were able to defeat the Bills in an overtime matchup in the Battle of New York City. Despite losing their quarterback, they were able to bounce back and beat the favored Bills, picking off Josh Allen 3 times. 3 picks to the same safety. Jordan Whitehead had himself a hat trick of a night. And the third game, the Sunday Night Football game, which was maybe not an upset statistically, but it made me upset. I don't think that the Giants were favored at all, but they're still my favorite. Well, on to week 2, I guess. In tonight's game, we're continuing the theme of primetime games that involve teams that I fucking hate. The Vikings are traveling to the landfill of Philadelphia to play against the Shitbirds in a game that has an over-under of 48.5. Now, the Flying Chickens are favored by an entire 7 points, so I have a feeling that this is another matchup that's going to piss me off. Now, looking at the other NFL games this week, it looks like another disgusting week being predicted from the Las Vegas odds. Most of the games floating around a 40-point over-under, with only about a handful of them going above 45. A couple notable matchups that I see are the Cowboys are going to play the Jets and are 9.5 favorites in that game, so file that in with other games that are going to piss me off, as well as the Bills going to play the Raiders, in which they are also 9.5 favorites. 9.5 favorites is basically Las Vegas's way of telling everybody that this is going to be a cheek clapping. The quarterbacks in tonight's matchup are rostered by Hristo and Greg. Aside from that, Raul has the Eagles defense, Henson has Devontae Smith, Vaughn has Alexander Madison, Eric has the tight end Dallas Goedert, and Justin Jefferson, the superstar wide receiver from the Vikings, is rostered by also Hristo. So it looks like a lot of us have our toes dipped in this game. It's going to be an exciting one for the group chat. So we're finally at the point in the season where we have actual matchups to talk about. So without further ado, let me start it off by shouting out to the Dub Club. Hristo, Henson, Greg, Raul, and Eric. Let's start off by taking a look at Raul's matchup versus Vaughn. So, Raul was able to sneak by a victory with the final score of 84-70 over Vaughn. Vaughn had to face the struggles of the poor Lamar Jackson, which we all thought was a huge pity party until we realized that Raul had the other worst quarterback of this week, Josh Allen. Next year, hashtag no QBs. Moving on down, it looks like both of Raul's starting running backs let him down with 6 points apiece, although he did have great backup from Brandon Ayuk, who scored 24 points. Ultimately, Ayuk, Diggs, and the Eagles defense were the turning point over defeating Vaughn in this matchup, as he only had 3 players that broke into the double digits this week. In our next matchup, Donnie faced off with Henson in a final score that resulted in Henson taking away the dub at 99-73 points. Now, looking at the graph here, it looks like Donnie was in the lead for most of the matchup until the Sunday night turn of events, at which Henson catapulted into the lead and stayed there through Monday night and the end of the week. Looking at their starters' performances, it looks like Donnie was one of the bench bosses this week, having multiple players go off on his bench that include Anthony Richardson and Tyler Algier. Now, for the players he did start, once again, only 3 of them were able to break into the double digits, one of them being the Saints defense, as well as the Detroit Lions stack of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown, the Sun God. On the other side, Henson had Tua Tagovailoa, one of the highest producing individual fantasy players of week 1, racking in a whole 31 points to himself. His running backs had something to say, with Travis Etienne and Bijan Robinson scoring 16 points and 14 points respectively. Devontae Smith reeled in 10 points to himself, and the Bengals had not a bad game defensively, although they had a horrible game on offense and lost the Battle of Ohio to the Browns in a spectacular fashion. In the next matchup of the week, Hristo. God damn it! We all know what happened. Moving on. Our next matchup was the clapping of the week. It was the Battle of the E-Boys, and Rick beat Dwin by over 50 points, a disgusting clapping to start off the season. Now, at a glance, when you see that Eric had Patrick Mahomes, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, and the Jets defense all racking in above 20 points, you can see why it was easy for him to sweep the floor. The team only had 1 player go over the 20-point mark, which was his 49ers defense. That's a trend that happened this week during the fantasy season. The defenses were making a lot of points, and the players who you expected to score were fucking horrible. And let's take a look at our last matchup of the week, perhaps the most poetic and beautiful, most painful suffering of a loss that happened to any one of us this week. Chef, once again on the chopping block for less than 1 point. This is a guy who went through 2 of these losses last year where he lost by less than 1 point. The final score of 83.68 to 83.24. And to top it all off, as you can see, Chef was in the lead the entire time until the very last moment when he was overtaken. And Chef, you already know what's coming.
'Cause you had a bad day, you're taking one down, you sing a sad song just to turn it around.
I'm definitely going to need to do some recovering mentally as well as some bouncing back in fantasy, just like a lot of us will, who either had a devastating loss in week 1 or had our roster suffer big injuries, which always suck when they happen in week 1. You get all excited for the season, you see your dudes out there, and then 3 snaps later he's out for the season. I don't know, man. Just a bad week overall for fantasy. Let's hope that next week is much better. Before I wrap it up this week, I just wanted to take a moment and say thank you guys for supporting me on the show. I do this all for you, so whenever you let me know your feedback or throw a little comment in the group chat, that's what really keeps me motivated and going for this show. And also for being an exquisite group of competitors. I couldn't ask for a better group of gentlemen to be in this league with. That being said, hopefully you're having fun this season in fantasy football. If not, it's going to get better. Hang in there, and I'll see you next week on the Fantasy Freestyle Podcast.
Wanna hear